One of the most common questions I get about running tabletop games has to do with the pre-written text in adventures. If you're not familiar, published RPG adventures usually contain sections of more flowery language, often referred to as boxed text, which you're meant to be able to read aloud or paraphrase for your table. These are intended as an aid for GMs. They're one of the oldest traditions we have for giving game masters a way to describe the adventure locations with language that is specifically meant to help your players picture the setting. But for some people, reading this kind of text aloud is easier said than done. So the question I get is usually some version of, how do you actually read pre-written text aloud in a way that's engaging for the players? Well, that's what we're going to figure out today. We'll look at some of the many potential pitfalls game masters struggle with when reading pre-written text aloud for their players, and give you the tools necessary to enhance the descriptions in your own game. And speaking of tools to enhance descriptions, this video is sponsored by Dscryb. They're a team of any award-winning writers that offer more than 10,000 pre-written scenes for you to read aloud at your table. And these go beyond the normal descriptions in most adventures, which are usually centered around locations or scripted events. Dscryb has scenes for monsters, magic items, spells, NPCs, and of course some awesome locations. In fact, as you'll see soon, they've got a fantastic collection of maps. Each one has multiple different descriptions connected to the different aspects of the map. So you can just open the website and pick a map and have everything you need to describe the location in lurid detail. And Dscryb is offering a discount to viewers of this channel. If you visit dscryb.com/supergeek and use the promo code supergeek at checkout, you could save 10% off of your first subscription payment. Once again, that's dscryb.com/supergeek and use the promo code supergeek. Thank you so much to Dscryb for sponsoring this channel. The first piece of advice is honestly the most important. Don't rush. I played with a GM who was really fantastic at designing encounters, role-playing the NPCs, they gave out really fantastic magic items, they were a great GM. But they did have a weak point, whenever it came to the pre-written text in a published adventure. When they read any box text aloud, it sounded like this. An enormous chamber with a 20-foot ceiling has been carved out of the rock here. A lighted lantern rests on the floor near the center of the room. An odd array of stone monoliths, some upright standing stones and others arranged in 3 stone arches, stand around the chamber. 6 low stone slabs are set against the walls around the perimeter of the room. Each holds humanoid bones dressed in scraps of tattered cloth and rusted iron. And honestly, no shade on that GM. It just wasn't one of their strengths. But whenever we got to these descriptions, hearing that rush through narration just really took me out of the game. It killed the momentum of the session, not only because it's not very immersive to have somebody bombard you with that much information with no inflection or passion, but also because I would just really struggle to understand any of what was said. I have a hard enough time processing box text read aloud to me without any visual assistance, but especially when it goes by that quickly, I'm not getting any of that. It's going in one ear and out the other. So this is the first tip, and it's the most important starting point. Take your time. It's not a race. Now, I can absolutely understand feeling self-conscious, and I'll admit, if you're watching a video looking for advice on how to improve your skill of reading text live at your table, you probably are feeling self-conscious. You might feel like because everyone's eyes are on you, but these words are not your own, there's a lot of pressure to get this right. But I promise, if you try to rush through it, that's only going to make it worse. Breathe normal and just read the text slowly enough so it can be understood. For an example, we're going to look at this scene from Dscryb, the refectory. I'm going to try not to use any of the tools we're going to discuss in a minute. I'm just going to try to read this slowly and clearly. Simple tables with long benches run in rows down the length of this large vaulted hall. Light filters through narrow windows set high in the walls. Meant to seat and feed 100 or more people, the chamber has no fireplace and feels chilly without their body heat. That's already a huge improvement. But of course there's an issue here. I have no idea what a refectory is. I've got no idea what I'm describing. Now, in a perfect world, you'll understand what you're describing, but we don't always live in a perfect world, and sometimes you're going to read something for the table, and there will be some term or word or detail that you don't understand. Or maybe you know what all the words mean, but you don't actually know how to pronounce it. So, here's the next tip. Just power through. Sound confident, and you'll be able to sell it. I don't know if any of you grew up going to church and had this experience, but for me, in church, we would have people get up and read Bible verses during the service, and these weren't the pastors, they were just regular old volunteers. And sometimes people would really struggle. You'd see them go over a word a couple of times right there at the lectern. And there are some buck wild words in the Bible. From 1 Kings 17, verses 8 and 9. Then the word of the Lord came to him, saying, Arise, go to Zarephath, which belongs in Sidon, and stay there. Behold, I have commanded you a window to provide for you. But my dad gave me a piece of advice that stuck with me to this day. When you get to a word you don't know, don't sit there and struggle with it. If you do, everybody's going to know that you don't know the word. Instead, just wing it. Make up a pronunciation. Yes, potentially you'll still pronounce it wrong, and potentially somebody who hears you is maybe going to know the word and know that you got it wrong. But most people probably won't, or they'll think it's one of those words that you've only read and never heard aloud, so yeah, you just mispronounced it, no big deal. But it's so much better to hear somebody just say something wrong with confidence than to just hear someone struggle to get it right over and over. This is about pronunciation, not like facts. This is not an endorsement of being confidently wrong. Just pronunciation. Seriously, just make up a pronunciation and move on. That's all you need to do. As an example, let's check out the Dscryb description for their map, Tomb of Sand. The ritual sand paintings on the floor continue out onto the stage, which is flanked by curved platforms. On them are low-bordered niches for the preparation of the dead. The stage looks over the long dromos, the walkway that crosses the sand-strewn floor, marked by the stages of the dead's journey. Do I have any idea if I'm pronouncing the word dromos correctly? You know I don't. Do I even know what a dromos is? You know I don't. Well, actually, that's a bad example. The scene makes sure to include the detail that the dromos is the walkway that crosses the sand-strewn floor. Come on, you know Dscryb wouldn't hang you out to dry like that. But also, if this is the first time I'm reading the scene and I haven't read ahead, I'm totally sight reading, then I don't know what a dromos is by the time I get to that word. But you know what? It super doesn't matter, because all you have to do is sell it. Speaking of being confident in your mistakes, what happens if you misspeak when you read a scene? Nothing. The sky won't fall, your players won't get up and leave. If you trip over a word and have to say it again, here's what you do. It's this simple. Just quickly acknowledge the slip up and move on. Now, the reason I say to acknowledge it is, ironically, to get players to stop thinking about it. If you trip over a word and move on, I don't know, maybe this is just my own self-consciousness telling on me, but I feel like people are more likely to keep thinking about that for longer. But instead, if you just acknowledge the mistake and get past it quickly, you weirdly take the power away from the mistake, and you can keep your players' attention on you and what you're saying instead of back on the mistake you made. As an example, I'm just going to read a description from the Chthonic Lighthouse map. It's ironic, considering I read my videos off of a teleprompter, but I'm not amazing at reading aloud. I sometimes need to take a section again, just re-recording chunks of the script so I can get them clean. But that's not an option you have at your table when you're running a game live for your friends. So I'll show you how to handle it when you misspeak. Huge corpulent fungi cling to the salt-sprayed rock, each pulsing softly with nauseatingly scintillating light. Any naturalist could tell you that they should not be able to grow in these conditions. In fact, they should not be here at all. See? It's just that easy. Just acknowledge it and move on. Honestly, I bet the only reason that moment stood out to you is because I told you in advance to look for it. And honestly, you're especially primed to look for mistakes because we're not in the same dynamic that you would get from running a game. I'm in a YouTube video, so I'm already on display and open for scrutiny much more than you will be as the game master at your table. Just acknowledge the flub and get past it quickly without comment, and you'll be fine. But okay, you know what would be nice? If you actually understood the text before you read it. So if you have a minute before you read the text aloud, just read it over once and familiarize yourself with what the text is describing. If there's a word you don't know, go ahead and Google it really quickly so that you know what you're saying. If you've got more than a few minutes, if you're reading over the text before the session, maybe try to find one of those pronunciation guides where somebody says the word aloud. I don't have like an example I can show you of what this looks like. You've probably Googled stuff before. You know how it works. Moving on. Speaking of looking things up, you can look up a bunch of awesome music and play it during your game to help add atmosphere. This is a whole other topic. We'll talk about this another day. We'll talk about making playlists and sourcing music and finding the right time to switch the music. But for the purposes of today's video, adding some background music can go a long way towards punching up your descriptions, which I'm going to prove throughout this video by cheating and using music to enhance my narration. Also, did you know that Dscryb has a music library you can get access to through your subscription? I'm just saying. Now here's the weakness of boxed text, just as a concept. You didn't choose these words. You can study these scenes in advance and know what you're saying, but that doesn't mean that you feel like the words somebody else selected are the right words. So here's the next tip. Change the words. As you're reading, if something doesn't sound natural or that you feel could be presented another way that might be easier to understand, then just find another way to say the same thing that you think will be clearer. This is actually something that I'm really used to having to do. Even though I write my own scripts for these videos, so everything I say is in my own words, I don't always pick the best combination of words for when I'm actually saying things aloud. So on the fly, when reading a script, I might switch some words around or use a synonym because I realize I'm using the same word too many times, or just add a little aside to help make my point another way when it feels like the pre-written script isn't quite enough. And you could say, well, Mike, because you're used to doing this with your teleprompter, you've developed the skill to do this in your D&D games when reading boxed text. But actually, it's the opposite. I picked up this technique years ago when I was struggling to read boxed text in a helpful and comprehensible way. And thankfully, it's the type of skill that serves me really well when I make YouTube videos, so it all works out. This technique actually helps with one of the issues I have with box text. It's very obvious when you slip into a pre-written scene, because the way you talk just changes completely. I don't mean that it sounds like you're reading, but literally, you suddenly find yourself describing rooms and settings in ways that you never normally would. Your vocabulary is suddenly totally different because the words were written by somebody else. Now, I've thought a lot about my narration style, so it's easier for me to adjust a scene in the midst of reading it to match the way I normally talk. But you can get started by just reading a scene and asking a question. Is this how I would normally explain this detail? If it's not, what's another way to say this? Now I'm going to show you this skill in action again by reading the Dscryb scene titled Great Library. And once again, this isn't a bad scene. It's a good scene. It's got lots of details, but it's just not written the way I talk. So my goal when reading this is to change any details I feel like changing, just to make it better suit my personal style of speech. This room is dominated by this colossal dragon skeleton. The long chamber is just filled with these bones. Its tail is pointing towards this huge table with a map sculpted onto the surface of it. There are several large brass light stands with golden orbs in the corners that are softly illuminating, and they're casting these really strange shadows through the skeleton. It's all just coming from these glowing orbs. There are shelves carved into the walls full of books and tomes. There are charts on any surface of the wall that doesn't have shelves on it. And in the corners, there are blue jars with rolled maps tucked into them, just sticking out. There are chairs that are really ornately engraved, placed around the room, and they match the red carpet, which just covers the entire floor. But how can you know what words will actually work better? How can you develop the skill of describing things in interesting ways? Well, here's another piece of advice. Read. Read a lot of books. And if you're able, listen to audiobooks. I know not everybody can interface with audiobooks, either because of accessibility issues or just because they're just not the best way for you to absorb information. But speaking completely personally, I sometimes have the opposite problem, at least when it comes to what we're discussing today. Much like how I can write first drafts of scripts that capture my thoughts but are clunky and hard to read aloud, reading books helps expand my vocabulary but doesn't give me a good sense of how these passages will sound when spoken. The benefit of audiobooks in this context is being able to hear someone describe settings and physical descriptions and events, and pick up techniques that can be applied to your own games. And whether you go with listening to audiobooks or reading books on paper or on a device, the nice thing is that this technique can almost develop unconsciously. You likely won't even realize it, but you'll develop a taste for what kinds of descriptions are useful for you and how you visualize scenarios, and which kind of descriptions leave you adrift in a sea of useless prose. Of course, unlike a prose writer or an audiobook narrator, you probably aren't limited to just using your words or your voice. When you're running a game in person or playing over Discord and you have the camera on, you have a whole other aspect available to you. Body language. Earlier, I referenced how using some sort of visual can help me understand narration, but I wasn't talking about just maps. If you watch my channel for any amount of time, you know I talk with my hands. And when I describe a scene for my players, I tend to physically gesture to help give a sense for where individual elements are in relation to each other. I think that helps build a picture in my players' heads, which cuts down on the number of follow-up questions they have to ask about the scene that I'm trying to narrate. As an example, I'll show you how I'd use my hands when reading this scene, the shrine entrance. A pair of braziers flicker eternally beside the entrance of the shrine, their flames unmoved by the breeze whistling through the valley. As you approach the towering doors set into the rock, you feel a weight pressing down upon you, as if you now carry a great burden. Two figures, eroded beyond recognition, stare down from the bas-reliefs etched into the stone lintel, their eyes narrowed in silent judgment. Note the hands? Notice my hands? Notice my hands! The next tip is one that I picked up much more recently than most of the others. In fact, I can tell you that I specifically learned this technique by watching Critical Role. Specifically, the first one-shot Liam O'Brien ran, which is still one of my favorites. The link is in the description. Liam does a really terrific job of making each description feel like something he's discovering in the moment.
While you guys are arguing, a gigantic red, like a gigantic alligator's claw, I guess, comes down along that slant and rakes in as much of it as it can and pulls gold. And as it does so, a little goblet spills out. You see a sword spill out on the ground?
This is something I try to capture in my own narration. I really love reading text in such a way that makes it seem much more organic and natural, with more of an element of discovery. This is something that really takes practice to get right, but I'll show you another example. Let's add this approach in as we narrate the description for this dungeon map, called the Ouroboros. Normally I would also tinker with the word choices as well, like I discussed earlier, since that helps capture the effect I'm going for. But to show you how to make it look like you're coming up with the perfect words off the top of your head, I'll actually stick to the script, so you know that nothing here represents me actually trying to find the words. It's part of the illusion that I craft for my players. The passageway leads away to either side, eventually curving out of sight. A charge dances on the cool air, carrying with it the sense of ozone and charcoal. It pulses in time with the rise and fall of the rippling sea green radiance issuing from the masonry lining every surface, which gives you the impression of being underwater. Braziers of black iron brood in the various corners, the mounds of glowing red coals within them echoing the rhythm of the green glow, but giving off little light of their own, and less warmth. Hopefully, if I did a good job, you weren't thinking about the fact that these words were written by somebody else. It all just feels like I was calling to mind the best words to describe the scene, and when, truthfully, I was just trying to sell you on the idea that this place exists, and I'm just trying to find the best words to describe it to you. The next piece of advice is just to take all of these tips, or just the ones that you like, and put them all together, and just practice. You don't have to try to master all of them at once. You can start with one or two techniques and fold in others over time. But just keep reading scenes aloud and keep trying to make it seem natural and clear and understandable. And don't wait until you have all of these skills mastered. Run games and keep learning and keep improving and keep practicing. And the final tip, and maybe the most important aside from all the other ones that are also the most important, relax. At the end of the day, this is a game. Any pressure you're feeling to improve your narration just comes from a place of love. You care about your players and want to run the best game you can for them. And that's a good thing. But don't let that very worthy ambition poison your perspective. It is important to describe scenes in a way that continues to immerse your players instead of breaking their momentum, but it's not the most important part of GMing. So be patient with yourself and be kind to yourself as you learn these skills. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you again to Dscryb for sponsoring this video. And as a reminder, if you visit dscryb.com/supergeek and use the promo code supergeek at checkout, you could save 10% off of your first subscription payment. Go check them out and show your support and get access to thousands of awesome scenes and maps and music that you can use in your game. Signing up by using my discount code also really helps this channel. And if you're looking for other ways to help support this channel, then like and subscribe and ring the bell so you can get notified about new videos as soon as they come out, which is usually Mondays and Thursdays. You can support me on Patreon. Every dollar amount really helps this channel. You can join my Discord server. It's a really wonderful community full of awesome people. Follow me on Twitch to catch my live streams and sign up for my newsletter to stay up to date with my latest news. The subject of pre-written text also has a lot to do with pre-published adventures, and you might be wondering if you should run pre-written modules or make up your own homebrew adventures. And if that's true, if that's something you're wondering about, then check out this video here. It might help you figure out the best answer for you. Until next time, play fair and have fun. And notice my hands!